The demon shifted its weight. The entire chamber vibrated. Ryu lost his balance and fell. The demon's body had moved around a bit. The flesh had slid and churned. There was no easy way to tell the front from the back. Ryu guessed that the demon had stood up. He inched closer, holding out his sword. The demon shifted again. It was turning. Now Ryu could make out its 4 leg stumps. A large bulbous growth on its opposite side must have been its head. They weren't face to face yet, but fighting fair wasn't the last thing. They weren't face to face yet, but fighting fair was the last thing on Ryu's mind. He charged. The dragon's sword sank into the demon's hide. A slow hiss sounded, releasing a hideous gas. Ryu pulled out the sword and stepped back. The demon kept turning. It was as if the stab were a mosquito bite. Now the demon was approaching. Its legs shuffled along the ground, wobbly under the immense weight. Its head lolled from side to side, extending from a thick neck. In the center of its face, a black hole opened up. It had to be a mouth, Ryu realized. It widened to twice its size, looming closer and closer. Ryu slashed with the dragon sword. It passed through the neck. The demon's head lopped clean off the body. It fell to the ground with a repulsive splat. Ryu gasped in horror. Where the head had been, a gaping hole remained. A hole much larger than the mouth, much more frightening. But Ryu felt nothing but relief. Somehow, he had succeeded where Shinobi had failed. The demon was dead. Resting his sword on the ground, he waited for it to fall. It staggered forward. Ryu figured it was like a chicken with its head cut off, running a few extra steps on nervous energy alone. But a chicken didn't breathe fire from the hole in its neck, and it didn't keep charging forward as if it could see. Ryu ran around to the other side of the chamber. The demon followed. It was still alive, and it was angry. Now the demon was moving faster. It came after Ryu, its bulky body swinging as it walked. Ryu edged away. He stared at the demon, afraid to lose eye contact. With his left hand, he felt along the wall, until he hit the corner. The demon's hole opened wider. Ryu looked around for an escape path. Suddenly, flames exploded from the demon's hole, like the exhaust of a spaceship taking off. Ryu threw himself into the ground. The explosion tore a hole in the wall, clear to the hallway. Ryu rolled in the only direction he could, toward the demon. He thrust the dragon sword blindly, running it through the underside of the demon. Each time a gash opened up, spitting fire and gas. Each time the gash closed by itself. The demon was healing itself instantly. Ryu rolled to the opposite end of the chamber. Concentrating with all his power, he activated the art of the fire wheel. Flames gathered all around him. He whirled his arms, tossing 3 fireballs toward the headless demon. The creature staggered. Ryu watched his ammunition become absorbed into the creature's skin. They had not the slightest effect. Or had they? The demon was moving differently. It seemed to be collapsing of its own weight. It also seemed to be shrinking. The boiling mass of flesh was folding into itself. Then again, almost instantly, the creature began swelling again. It was pulsing with the rhythm of the statues. So that's it, Ryu said under his breath. The demon was receiving its energy from the joined statues. If it were left alone, it would take the energy and grow to full strength. But Ryu was doing exactly what it didn't want. He was weakening it slowly, not letting it collect all its power. Each of his thrusts, each fireball, was keeping the demon from becoming all-powerful. Ryu ran toward it, full tilt. He made rapid thrusts with the dragon sword. The demon spat fire. The fire enveloped Ryu's entire body. But the art of the fire wheel was protecting him, using the demon's flame to become stronger. Now Ryu lunged furiously. With one hand, he plunged the dragon sword again and again. With the other, he flung fireballs. Whoom! The demon had lost control of its legs. It fell to the ground. Behind it, the statues were vibrating wildly. They glowed with garish light now, crashing into each other, out of control. Pieces of stalactites began to fall from the ceiling. Large cracks opened up in the walls. The place was going to blow. Ryu had to get out. He flew toward his nemesis, slashing. With a last pathetic groan, the demon crumbled to the ground. Its skin began bubbling furiously, rushing inward to a central point. Ryu felt himself being sucked inside. The floor began to buckle. The left wall caved in, and chunks of marble hurtled toward the disappearing demon. It was like a black hole, imploding into itself, sucking in matter and light. Parts of the ceiling fell, exposing the open sky. Hard as Ryu tried, he couldn't keep from sliding toward the center of the collapsing chamber. Ryu made one last thrust with the dragon sword, downward into the ground. It held fast. He dragged himself forward, digging his hand into the gash the sword had made. Holding himself steady with that hand, he used the other hand to remove the sword and plunge it farther away. Thrust by thrust, Ryu made his way to the edge of the chamber where the wall had blown in. The farther he got, the weaker the demon's pull. By the time he reached the hallway, he could stand up. He sheathed the dragon's sword and ran back to his father. Ken Hayabusa lay on a heap just inside the door. "Dad!" Ryu cried out. "I got it! I got the demon!" Dr. Hayabusa's eyes fluttered open. "I know, my son. Nothing else could have created the noise around us." He gave a weak smile. I'm proud of you." Ryu knelt down and began to hook his arms underneath his father. "Come on, we have to go!" "No!" came Dr. Hayabusa's sharp retort. "If you try to save me, we'll both die. When the demon goes, it will take the temple with it, and it won't take long. Go now, Ryu, save yourself!" "We can do it, Dad!" Ryu protested. "I won't! Look out!" Dr. Hayabusa shouted. Ryu looked up. An enormous wooden beam was falling from the ceiling. He jumped out of the way, pulling his father with him. "Ryu, if you wait another second, it'll be too late! Go!" Ryu hesitated. His father was right, but he couldn't obey him. He could never leave him to die like this. It would be far better for the two of them to die together, united at last. "Think of your mother, Ryu!" Dr. Hayabusa insisted, as if he were reading his son's mind. "If she loses us both, the family is ended. She'll be alone." A boulder crashed to the ground inches from Ryu. The force knocked him down. "Go!" his father repeated. "I will not rest easy unless my son and my wife are alive." Ryu made his decision. He got to his feet. "I will always think of you, Dad." His face was streaked with tears. Then he turned on his heels and ran out. The black stone path was blocked. He headed in the other direction and found a narrow corridor. There were rooms to either side. Some of their doors were open, and Ryu could see the test tubes, massive computers, vats of molten liquid, all bubbling or short-circuiting, all on the verge of destruction. What sinister experiments was the Jaquio conducting here? Perhaps the world would never know. He sprinted down the corridor, unable to shake the thought of his father writhing in the other room. At each step he wanted to turn back. But he knew the greatest honor he could give his dad was to obey his dying wish. "Help!" The voice made Ryu stop. It was coming from behind a closed door at the end of the corridor. As he passed it, Ryu flung it open. There, sitting tied to a chair, was the red-haired CIA agent. A robot guard was jittering uncontrollably nearby, crashing into a table of electronic equipment. Ryu rushed in and untied her. At least there was one life he could save. "Come on!" he commanded. Together they raced through the temple. There was no easy route. Whatever corridor was unblocked, they took. All around them, the temple was falling apart. They were running blindly now. For all they know, they might have been going in circles. As Ryu's legs pounded the ground, one thought repeated itself in his head. The world was safe again. In seconds he'd be dead, but the world was safe. The sky was ablaze. To the east of the temple, the sun was plump and golden as it rose above the horizon. The scorched soul of the plain began cracking in new places, as it did every morning. The jungle heated up like a steam bath. But this morning was different from all the others. The living creatures knew. Birds skittered across the sky, confused. The jungle animals remained huddled in their dens, afraid to come out. The ground, which had never moved in centuries, was shifting. The earth was heaving. Ryu Hayabusa stood on a mound near the edge of the jungle, half a mile from the temple. Next to him was the red-haired girl. Moments earlier they had escaped through an underground exit. Now they stared silently, struggling to keep their balance. Their eyes were fixed on the enormous rock mesa. For thousands of years it had proudly stood at the same spot. Who knew how long it had been a monument to the demon? Who knew where the demon had come from? Why it was there? Perhaps those questions would never be answered. The temple was sinking. It teetered to one side, then the next, slowly settling into the ground. The two of them were so intent they almost didn't know the darkness coming over the plain. It was almost pitch dark before Ryu looked to the rising sun. Its round shape was slowly being blotted out by a shadowy circle. "It's a solar eclipse," the young woman said in awe. "The time of the dark moon," Ryu whispered. "What?" "The demon will begin to wake at the time of the dark moon," Ryu said. "That's what the inscription said. I guess this is what it meant." As the moon passed in front of the sun, the area plunged into darkness. A sonic boom rocked the ground beneath them. Ryu and the young woman fell. A cloud of dust covered them. They shielded their faces, coughing uncontrollably. Ryu could feel light beginning to seep in through his closed eyelids. He stayed huddled to the ground until the dust had settled. Then he opened his eyes. The sun was full again. It shone on a perfectly flat plain. Where the Temple of Darkness had been, there was now a dense cloud of smoke. "It's over," the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Ryu answered sadly. Another voice suddenly crackled through the air. "Come in, Sea Swallow!" Ryu spun around to face the girl. The voice was coming from her shirt pocket. With a look of embarrassment, she took a calculator-sized object from her pocket. "This is Sea Swallow," she answered into it. "Our satellites have detected an explosion in the area." "Yes, sir," the girl responded. "The temple is destroyed." "Excellent. Congratulations. Did the Hayabusa boy survive?" The girl looked very nervous. "Yes, he did, sir," she stuttered. We have one more task for you, Sea Swallow, and then you can come home." "What's that, sir?" "Take the statues and kill Hayabusa." The girl was speechless. Ryu grabbed the communicator out of her hand. "Hello, Foster," he said icily. "The statues are gone, and I intend to live." "Who is this?" Foster demanded. "Who? Not who, Ryu. Are you going to congratulate me, too?" Silence. Ryu waited a full minute. He enjoyed imagining Foster squirm. Ryu," Foster finally said, forcing a chuckle. You realize, of course, I was talking in code. Ah, yes, Ryu replied, and kill Hayabusa actually means bring him home to a ticker tape parade, right? Really, Ryu? Really, Ryu? Did you think we would? It's all clear now, Foster. Your men were the thugs who stole the dark statue from Dr. Wimple all those years ago. That's how you got hold of it. You've wanted the statues all along, and you would stop at nothing to get them, even if it meant killing people. I beg your pardon. These are serious accusations. Our attorneys... I'll get you, Foster, Ryu said, his voice dark with vengeance. I'll get you for putting your greed ahead of the world's safety. I'll get you for the murder of my father. Your father? What did we have to do with? If I had been able to do it my way, I would have saved him, Ryu shot back. You forced everyone's hand, Foster. Sea Swallow, Foster shouted. I command you to obey me! Ryu's eyes locked with Sea Swallow's. They stood that way for a moment, letting Foster bellow. Finally, Sea Swallow took the communicator. Foster, she said, get lost! With that, she hurled the small instrument into the dusty air. Together, they watched the cloud billow where the temple had stood. It looked as though it would never settle. Ryu's mission had been a success. The world was safe. Ryu had faithfully followed his father's letter, had even fulfilled his dying request. He knew he should have been happy for those few moments with his dad, moments he had never expected to see. But all Ryu would ever remember was that he had left his father in the rubble, left him to die. He would never forgive himself. Maybe if his father really had died those many years ago, it would have been better. Maybe he wouldn't feel so torn apart right now. Ryu felt Sea Swallow's arm come to rest on his shoulder. He wasn't sure he trusted her, but the gesture felt good. He sighed. For a few minutes, his mind went blank. He thought he saw a figure coming toward them across the plain. A wandering animal, perhaps, confused and homeless. Finally, he turned and asked, "What's your name, anyway?" "Irene," she said. "It's the Greek word for peace, you know." "Irene," Ryu repeated. He looked back to the plain. How ironic, he thought. He finally had reached a kind of peace in his life. He finally had proven worthy of his ninja training. But the cost was great. He would forever live with sadness. "Hey, can I join the picnic?" Ryu froze. He was hallucinating, hearing his dad's voice. "Come on, help me up!" Irene was staring over Ryu's shoulder. Her eyes were wide. "Turn around, Ryu!" Ryu looked down the hill. There was a man struggling to climb up. Ken Hayabusa! Ryu rubbed his eyes. When he finished, his father was still there, smiling, standing lopsided. One of his legs had a 2x4 strapped to it with a belt. "Dad!" Ryu cried out. "How?" Dr. Hayabusa shrugged. "The paralysis was temporary. The wood fell into my hands. It was a winning combination. Besides," he added with a wink, "you're not the only ninja around here." With a whoop of triumph that carried across the plain, Ryu raced down to his father. Dr. Hayabusa reared back his head and howled with delight. Atop the hill, Irene was crying. The Hayabusa family was complete again. For Ryu, a new life had begun. 2 new lives. And there we have it. That is FX9 and the Worlds of Power's adaptation of Ninja Gaiden. And yeah, it kind of pulls a Little Shop of Horrors twist at the end, changing what actually happened in the game itself. spoiler alert here, but we're talking about a game that debuted, 35 years ago. But yeah, in the original game, Ryu's father, Ken Hayabusa, does not survive. And apparently the author/creators, because again, FX9 was just a pseudonym for another person, the real name escapes me right now, but they entrusted a number of ghostwriters to create this anyway, so we have no idea who exactly wrote the story, but the people behind this, they apparently had some kind of mandate about not wanting to see anyone actually die in these books. Which I guess is why all of the boss monsters in this thing, they just vanish upon being defeated. Which I guess isn't that different from a video game anyway. But yeah, you are all definitely welcome to offer your own opinions and reviews on how this book chose to end. This is actually one of the first books, it's almost inspired me to become a filmmaker. This is probably the first thing I ever hoped to adapt into a movie created by myself. I never got around to doing it, but at the very least I fulfilled some type of promise and to be able to create my own videos one way or another. And nowadays I look to try to create my own original stuff anyway, so I think it worked out best anyway. But thank you all for going on this journey with this book. I have at least one more Worlds of Power book in my possession, and this is one I've never actually read before. Especially like Metal Gear, actually. I'd never read Metal Gear before reading it for you guys. And this next book, I've never read either before. And I think we're going to show you that one next time. So look forward to all of you coming back for the next edition of Rowdy Reads. Until that time comes, as always, stay rowdy, my friends.